Hello, hello. Welcome to another episode of Run Talk. I'm your host, Dr. Jason Karp. On today's episode, we're going to revisit something that we talked about on an earlier episode on interval training. And we'll discuss some other things today about interval training and how intervals should be done and when they should be done and how to use it, what's the purpose of each type of workout, and how to get the most out of it. So welcome. This is our 17th episode. I can't believe we've been doing this for now 17 weeks. Perhaps someday we'll get picked up by NBC or ABC or CBS and we'll be broadcast on the big screen on TV. But until then, we are on Facebook and Instagram Live. So welcome to our 17th episode of Run Talk. I'm your host, Dr. Jason Karp. So let's get right into it. Interval training has become very popular. That it seems like everybody's doing it, from elite runners to grandma next door. But a lot of people don't necessarily do interval training correctly, or they run too fast when they're supposed to be running at a given speed. And so I want to spend some time talking about what the purpose of interval training is and how to use it and how to get the most out of it. And so I'll start by saying that intervals are not for everyone. Depending on what your goals are, you still need to first have a good base of aerobic work behind you. And so if you're running, say 10, 15, 20 miles a week, then I would increase the volume of running that you do first. That's going to have the greatest impact on your running success, and not worry about interval training. Interval training tends to get overused, but you're not going to get much out of the interval training if you're not running that much to begin with. The corollary to that is that you can get fit fast if you do a lot of interval training. And so people are interested in doing it because people are impatient and they want to get fit fast. They want to run a lot of races. And so interval training is the quickest way to get fit, because when you increase the intensity, then that has a pretty potent effect on your fitness level. But if you're interested in becoming the best runner you can be over an extended period of time, next year, the year after that, then the best strategy is to focus on the aerobic work first, build that up, and then start to integrate some interval workouts. So let's talk about how to do interval workouts correctly. I'll start with a story. Like I said before, there's no teleprompter. When you watch these talk shows on TV, you realize that they're reading everything that they're saying. There's very little ad-lib going on. On Run Talk, there is no ad-lib. I'm not reading a teleprompter here in front of me on the screen. I'm just talking off the top of my head. And I'll let you guys guide what I say too. If you ever have any questions, feel free to ask. I'm happy to answer any questions. But I'm just talking off the top of my head the major points that I want to get through. And so I'll start with a story. Back in 2009, I was coaching at a college, and I coached cross-country season. And a lot of the runners from cross-country season ran the races during track. They were distance runners during track. And they split up into different groups based on what specific events that they were training for. Some were 800-meter, 1,500-meter runners. Some were 5K, 10K runners. And they would go to different coaches depending on what they were doing. And the 800-meter runners, I noticed that in November, like right after cross-country season ended, in November, they were on the track wearing spikes, doing interval workouts, doing 200-meter reps at their PR 800-meter pace in November. Now, these are athletes who want to peak at the end of May. NCAAs are early June, so if you're good enough to get to NCAAs, then you are competing into early June. But most college runners, their season will end like mid to late May. So these are people who want to peak at mid to late May for the most part, some maybe even a little bit later in early June. And in November, they are running 200-meter reps at their 800-meter PR pace. I couldn't believe it. And I said to the head coach, why are these 800-meter runners running in spikes that fast in November? And she said to me that, there are two schools of thought. The endurance school of thought, the aerobic side, and then the speed work side, the speed work school of thought. And when she explained this to me, I said to her, you're right. There are two schools of thought. The right school of thought and the wrong school of thought. And the wrong school of thought is to put 800-meter runners on the track in November in spikes running at their PR 800-meter pace for 200-meter reps when they're trying to peak in November. That's the wrong school of thought. That's never going to work. They start doing that, and they're going to peak way too early. They're not going to be able to carry that fitness all the way through from November all the way through until the following May. That strategy is not going to work. But what can you do? Nobody wants to listen to me. They just want to do what they want to do. People want to believe that they want to believe that they know things, and it's very difficult sometimes, very frustrating for me because if they would only listen and train correctly, they would be so much better. But what are you going to do? So anyway, let's talk about what not to do, and then we'll talk about what to do. If you're interested in PRing in the 800 meters in May, don't be putting on spikes and running at your PR 800-meter pace for 200-meter reps in November. That strategy is not going to work. First, build yourself up aerobically. Even the 800 meters requires a lot of aerobic work. And then, slowly but surely, you start to integrate the interval workouts. So let's talk a little bit about that. Oh, I already see a question here. Michael. Hey, Michael, over in Switzerland. Michael. Since aerobic work has a lot to do with breathing, is there any way for a good breathing technique? Okay, great question, Michael. I spoke about this on a whole other episode, but I want to answer questions, so I will suffice it to say here that running is not about breathing. You have no problem at sea level or even modest altitude. You have no problem getting air in. And so the oxygen that's in the environment gets through our nostrils and our mouth and into our lungs, and that's not what's limiting performance. You breathe heavier when you run, not in an attempt to get in more oxygen, but because of the carbon dioxide that increases because of metabolism, you get CO2 production, and that's what drives the breathing at sea level. It's only when you go to very high altitude, like Michael, when we were in Kenya together, when you go to that high altitude, E10 is at 7,900 feet of altitude, then it is a combination of both the partial pressure of carbon dioxide in the blood that's driving the breathing, as well as the need to get in more oxygen, because with each breath you're taking in less oxygen. But how much you breathe or how hard you breathe, that's not what's limiting endurance performance. If you want to get more oxygen to the muscle tissue, then we have strategies to do that. We increase the heart rate, we increase the stroke volume, and those two things together make up the cardiac output. So it's the cardiovascular responsibility to get more blood and more oxygen to the working muscles. And so you don't really have to worry about the type of technique that you have when you're breathing. That's not really what you need to focus on. Okay, so hopefully I answered that question, but I refer you back to one of the other episodes, which was all about breathing, and there's another episode that talked about altitude training, and so. But I do want to answer the question. So let's get back to interval training. So there's a few different kinds of interval workouts that you can do to understand the purpose. And so there's many ways. Let me go backtrack a little bit. There's many ways to build endurance. The aerobic way is one way, just going out and running mile after mile after mile. That is one way. That's the traditional way of building aerobic endurance. But you can also build it through a very high volume of interval workouts, where the speed is not that fast, but you're doing so many reps of them. And so that's another way to build endurance, a high volume of repetitions. I talk about that in the new book I'm writing now on training theories, training program design for runners, different models of periodization, all of that. And so that's one of the theories that I include in the book is how to develop endurance, specific endurance, through a very high volume of interval training. But when you do that, the pace isn't that fast. Because if the pace is fast, then you're not going to be able to do that many reps, and that defeats the whole purpose of building the endurance. To build the endurance, the workout's got to last a while, and to do that, the pace has to slow down. So that's one way to build endurance. But there are many different kinds of interval workouts that you can do. And so, one kind is to train the lactate threshold, which I call the acidosis threshold. If you're familiar with my work, I call it acidosis threshold, to take the emphasis off of lactate and to place it on the thing that causes fatigue, which is the acidosis, which accumulates at the same time that lactate accumulates. So you can do reps at threshold pace. You can do a continuous tempo run that runners do at threshold pace, or you can break it up into an interval format so that you can accomplish more total work at that pace. So an example would be, half mile or 800-meter reps at threshold pace, and then you do them all day until you get tired. You do many of them. Or you could do mile or 1 kilometer reps or 2 kilometer reps at threshold pace. So you do a lot of reps at threshold pace. So it's aerobic. You keep high-end aerobic, and you take a very short recovery interval. If you do mile reps, maybe take a minute rest. If you do 800-meter reps, maybe you take 45 seconds rest. Something short, not too short that it doesn't allow you to complete the next rep at the same time, but you don't want it to be too long either, because it's the same pace that you could have run for a continuous run. You're just breaking it up into an interval format so that you can accomplish more total work at a given intensity. And that's one of the themes, if you will, of interval training. That's one of the purposes of taking a set amount of work and breaking that work up into periods of work and rest and work and rest and work and rest, is that it allows you, it enables you to accomplish a greater total volume of work in a given session, in a given workout. That's the whole reason for doing an interval workout, because if you were to run continuously at that pace, you wouldn't be able to run for as long. You wouldn't be able to accomplish as much total distance as you would if you could break it up into an interval workout. So an interval workout is a better way to do it to accomplish more total work. So one example is doing a threshold workout where you run at threshold pace and you repeat the reps for a while until you're very, very tired. Another type of workout is a VO2 max workout, where the purpose is now cardiovascular. When you do threshold work, whether you do it as a continuous run or you do it as an interval format, it's mostly about what's happening inside the muscle. It's about lactate removal. It's about transporting that lactate to other places where it's used. It's oxidized. It's used by the heart as a fuel source. It's used by the liver and gluconeogenesis to make more glucose. Lactate is used in a lot of different places. Lactate's a very interesting molecule, and it's got a lot of uses in metabolism. It gets a bad rap, but it's actually very important. Read George Brooks's work from UC Berkeley. He's done a lot of work on lactate transport and lactate shuttling between cells, and very fascinating work. George Brooks is one of the top physiologists in the world in this area. He's been at UC Berkeley for most of his career. So look up his work on lactate shuttling and lactate transport. From time to time, I'll refer you to other people who are prominent people in the field of exercise physiology, because it's important to read. It's important to read the history of the field and where this stuff comes from and what led us to where we are now and how you apply all this to training. And so George Brooks is a great guy to read his work. I've had a chance to meet him many times and talk to him about his work. It's fascinating. So anyway, so when you do a threshold training, I digress a lot. I know I digress a lot when I talk about this stuff, because I got a lot of things going through my head when I'm talking to you guys. So when you do threshold work, most of what is happening, most of the benefits of what is happening, the purpose of the workout, is what's happening inside of muscle. Then when you do the VO2 max work, we transition from what's happening inside the muscle, even though with VO2 max work, there's still a lot of stuff happening inside the muscle. But now we're placing the emphasis on the cardiovascular system and the delivery of oxygen to the working muscles. And so VO2 max training is very interesting because of what it is you're trying to accomplish with the workout. When you run at your VO2 max, which corresponds to 100% of max heart rate, by definition, the VO2 max occurs when you reach your max heart rate. So you want to do the reps at max heart rate or very, very close to it. And you want to be revving the aerobic engine as fast as it can go. And that's what VO2 max represents. It's the maximum rate at which oxygen can be consumed. And so you can think of it as the size of your aerobic engine. And when you're revving that aerobic engine as fast as it can go, that's when you reach your VO2 max. And so to do those workouts, you want to be running at your max heart rate during the reps. And so when you run at max heart rate and then you jog to recover during the recovery interval, a lot of fascinating things happen. The heart rate and the VO2 start slowing down very rapidly because now you're not running as fast. And so, people measure this nowadays. You have your heart rate monitor. People can graph this all the time. You see that the VO2 and you'll see the heart rate on the heart rate monitor, it decreases rather rapidly. But you have this incredible return of blood back to the heart. That's called the venous return. So you have all this blood that was in the muscles while you're running, and then during recovery, when you're just jogging and the demand is not there to send as much blood to the working muscles, you have an incredibly high venous return. And so you have all this blood going back up to the right side of the heart, which eventually gets dumped into the left side of the heart. And so because you have a slowing heart rate, but you've got all this blood coming into the left ventricle of the heart, then that allows for more blood to enter that chamber between beats. And so what happens during the subsequent beat? We squeeze out more blood. You can't pump what you don't have. But during the recovery interval of these interval workouts, you have a lot. You have all this venous return. You got a huge amount of blood coming back up to the heart. So all that blood enters the chamber, enters the left ventricle, which is the most important ventricle to pump blood everywhere else. And with each subsequent beat of the heart, it squeezes out an enormous amount of blood, and that's your stroke volume. And so during an interval workout, we get many peaks in the stroke volume, which happen during the recovery interval, not happen during the work period. And so that's the stimulus to increase maximum stroke volume. And eventually, maximum cardiac output. You take your stroke volume times your heart rate, you get cardiac output. And so the VO2 max intervals can be pretty powerful in that regard because you're focused on the heart's ability to pump blood. One of the adaptations we also make is enlargement of the left ventricle. It's called left ventricular hypertrophy. So over time, through doing many of these kinds of workouts, we increase the size of the heart. And we also increase the heart's ability to contract. Just like if you wanted to make your biceps stronger, you go and lift a heavier weight than what your biceps are used to lifting. It's the same concept for the heart. If you want your heart to become a stronger pump, a stronger contraction with every squeeze, then you need to work at its maximum capability. And so there's three things that happen with these VO2 max interval workouts. We get better contraction of the heart. That's called heart contractility. We get enlargement of the left ventricle, left ventricular hypertrophy. And we get an increase in venous return, which leads to a greater stroke volume during the workout itself. Those three things combined ultimately lead to a greater cardiac output and a greater ability to transport and deliver oxygen to the working muscles. And so by doing that, we increase the VO2 max. And so those workouts are very important to increase the VO2 max. If people who are already trained, who have done a lot of aerobic work, you can increase the VO2 max just by increasing your weekly volume. But once you have a pretty sizable aerobic base, then you put in these VO2 max workouts, and you can increase the VO2 max even more. It's even been shown on really good runners. Look up Veronique Bilot's work. She's shown that. Veronique Bilot is over in France, another great researcher in the area of training and VO2 max and paces to use. So she's another great researcher, very good runner herself as well, small woman. But most of her work is in French, so it helps if you know French. Not a lot of her work has been translated in English. I co-authored some papers with her where I translated helped her translate some of the work. My French used to be a lot better than it is now, but I've had the honor to co-author a few papers with Veronique Bilot, so it's great. So she's another one to look up. So VO2 max workouts, it's very important to run them at the right pace. You got to run them at a VO2 max pace. And nowadays with heart rate monitors, you could just do it by heart rate if you wanted to. If you know what your true max heart rate is, then you can run the reps based on heart rate and try to reach your max heart rate during each rep. And so that's why when you record the workout, it's important to know what the peak heart rate is during each rep, because you want to know, well, how close did you get to your max heart rate on each rep? That gives you a good sense of the intensity of the workout. That's something that's good to document. And then you can compare over time when you run at a given pace, did my heart rate reach max? And one thing you'll find over time, if you plan out the training correctly, is that you'll be able to run faster to reach max heart rate over time. And that's how you know that you're trained. That's how you know that you're getting better, is that running at the same pace will now cause you to reach a lower heart rate because you're more fit. So you're going to have to adjust the pace so that you can run right up at your max heart rate again. And so that's the process of training. So you can match the pace to the heart rate, and that's a great way to progress with the training over time. And so those workouts need to be done at a certain pace, at your VO2 max pace, which is approximately equal to a mile to mile and a half race pace in recreational runners, closer to 2 mile race pace in pretty good runners. So think about a race that takes about 7 to 10 minutes. A race that takes 7 to 10 minutes, that will correspond to your VO2 max pace. So like I said, for most runners, it may be mile to mile and a half race pace. And for good runners, it'll be closer to 2 mile race pace. You don't want to run any faster than that. All you need to do is run at that pace and then repeat the reps and then take equal in time or slightly less than equal in time as the recovery interval. So if you run 3 minutes hard, take 2 to 3 minutes recovery jog. If you run 4 minutes hard, take 3 to 4 minutes recovery jog. Don't make the reps any longer than 4 to 5 minutes because, like I just said, if it's the pace that corresponds to 7 to 10 minute race, if you make the reps longer than 5 minutes, how many reps are you going to be able to do in the workout? You might be able to do 2 reps and then you're done because you're running at the pace that you could sustain in a race situation for 7 to 10 minutes. So you don't want the reps to be 5 minutes long. You may only be able to squeeze out 2 reps in that workout before you're exhausted. And so it's better to go maybe at the lower end, maybe 3 minutes, because then you can do more reps in the workout and you have more opportunities for a recovery interval and a spike in stroke volume. And so it's better to have multiple recovery intervals during the workout. That's why it's called, on another episode I talked about why it's called an interval workout. It doesn't refer to the periods of work, it refers to the recovery interval. The emphasis is on what happens during the recovery interval. So the more recovery intervals you have during the workout, the better the workout's going to be. And so the recovery intervals match the reps. So you could think of it as the more reps you have in the workout, the better the workout is going to be. So you have to plan it out that way. If you want to go faster than VO2 max intervals, then you can get into the anaerobic training, where you work on speed endurance, anaerobic capacity, which focuses on anaerobic glycolysis as the predominant energy system. For those kinds of workouts, you don't even need to wear a heart rate monitor. It's irrelevant. What now matters is the speed. Now we again transition back to what's happening inside the muscle. So again, with threshold workouts, we're really focused on what's happening inside the muscle. For VO2 max workouts, we're focused on what's happening with the heart. And then when we go to anaerobic capacity intervals, now again we transition back to the focus being on the muscle, specifically the buffering of the acidosis. Now during these workouts, you want to drop the pH of the muscle, you want to cause acidosis so that we adapt to that, and we improve our ability to hold a fast speed. We improve our speed endurance. And so for those workouts, you want to run pretty fast. For a recreational runner, maybe half-mile race pace. For a very good runner, maybe mile race pace to half-mile race pace. And then again, you repeat that work over and over and over again until you're absolutely exhausted. Those workouts are very difficult. They're fast. You're working on speed. You're working on recruitment of fast-twitch motor units, fast-twitch muscle fibers. And you're creating acidosis. You're dropping the pH. You're causing an acidic environment inside your muscles, which your body will respond to and create a better buffer to that acidosis so that you can run faster in the future without causing the same degree of acidosis. So I know I throw a lot of technical terms out there, but when you really look at what the focus is of these different workouts, and then you can design workouts to meet specific purposes. So the threshold workouts are to improve your ability to run at a high aerobic pace, to improve the ability to run faster and have it still be aerobic. That has huge consequences for races. So that's the purpose of the threshold intervals. The purpose of the VO2 max intervals is to raise your aerobic ceiling, to increase the size of your aerobic engine by focusing on the heart's ability to deliver blood and oxygen. And the focus on the anaerobic capacity intervals is to improve the muscle buffering ability of the acidosis. And in order to do that, you got to cause acidosis during the work. And so those are the major types of interval. You can even get faster and do the pure speed work, where you're working on the phosphagen system and using your store of creatine phosphate to work on really fast running. But most distance runners won't do that too much, unless you're an 800-meter runner or even a miler will do that kind of work, where you run for 10, 15 seconds almost as fast as you can, and then you take a long recovery interval of 3 to 5 minutes, and then you repeat that. That works on pure speed. But the three major kinds of interval workouts that most distance runners will do, the threshold intervals, the VO2 max intervals, and the anaerobic capacity or the speed endurance intervals. But it's important to know, when to do them. You don't just do them arbitrarily. You look on social media, everyone's got their Track Tuesday. What's special about Tuesday? Just because the T in track and the T in Tuesday match each other? I like the alliteration. I'm a writer. I love alliteration with letters, but don't do a workout just because it's Tuesday and it's Track Tuesday. You have to understand when to do the workouts. And so, that gets into the art as well as the science. If you take a linear periodization approach, then you start with a higher volume and lower intensity. And through each macro cycle of the year, which is like a period of 3 to 4 months, through each macro cycle, you move from the higher volume and low intensity, and you slowly but surely transition so that over time you're dropping the volume and increasing the intensity. You could take a reverse linear periodization approach where you do the exact opposite, where first you focus on the intensity and get fast, and then you focus on the ability to endure a faster speed. So that's a unique way to train. I'm writing all about that in my book too. I'm more in favor of that for a marathon and half marathon. Work on getting fast first, and then, and especially for recreational runners who only run slow, it's really important for them. Work on the speed first, and then work on being able to endure a higher fraction of that speed. Whereas for all other races, it's probably better to take a linear periodization approach, do more intensity later as it gets closer to the more important races, do the volume first. It also takes longer to build volume, to build endurance, and to build speed. So you got to keep that in mind when you're designing the training program. And so there's a lot of factors that come into play. Where, when do you do these interval workouts? How much of each do you do? You got to look at your strengths. We talked about fiber type last week's episode, talking about how you can skew the training to your strengths. So how much of each type of interval workout you do. A lot of that comes down to what your strengths are as a runner. And if you know that you have more of those intermediate fast twitch A muscle fibers, then you'll do better off of more of the anaerobic interval training. Whereas if you've got a lot of slow twitch muscle fibers, you'll do better off of the threshold kind of interval training. So there's a lot of factors that you have to all pull together to decide how much interval training to do, when in the program to do it, what kind of interval training to do. It can become a very complex process, but that's where I think the beauty lies in designing training programs, is to attend to all of those different things and take all those things into consideration. So, Christopher, hi Jason, a bit late to the party yet. Well, welcome. It's always good to have you in the room, Chris. And I'm happy to answer any questions. Feel free to ask any questions about interval training or about anything related to running. But I really just wanted to speak today about how to design interval workouts, and when to do them in the program. So let's break this open a little bit. Let's look at linear periodization. So you start with building the volume. You start with easy running, and then you do that for maybe a few mesocycles within the macro. So a mesocycle is a few weeks long, maybe 3 to 4 weeks long, and a macrocycle is a few months long. So it's like one season, like a spring or a fall or a summer, something like that. And so you have a few mesocycles within each macrocycle. I'll talk about periodization on another episode. That'd be a good talk. So you transition from building up the volume over the course of a few mesocycles, and then you'll start with, then the more quality aerobic work. So maybe you put in one threshold workout a week, and you get used to one threshold workout a week. You do that for a little bit of time, and then you put in a second threshold workout a week. And again, how much of each you do depends on a number of factors: your strengths and weaknesses, what specific race you're training for. If you're training for a marathon, you're going to spend more time on the aerobic side, less time on the anaerobic. If you're training for the mile, you'll spend more time on the anaerobic side. You won't put as much emphasis on the threshold training, but you still have to do it all for all races. It's a matter of how much emphasis you give to one type of training versus the other. So going back to the linear periodization approach for the interval workouts, after you do the threshold training, you put in 1 per week, then you put in 2 per week, you get used to that. Then it's time to transition to the VO2 max workout. You're doing 2 workouts a week. You take out one of the threshold workouts, you put in a VO2 max workout. Now you have 1 threshold and 1 VO2 max. You get used to that for a few weeks. and then you take out the other threshold, you put in a second VO2 max. Now you got 2 VO2 max workouts. You get used to that for a while. Then you take out 1 VO2 max workout, you put in 1 anaerobic capacity workout. Now you got 1 of each. You get used to that for a while. You take out the other VO2 max workout, you put in the second anaerobic capacity workout. Now you got 2 anaerobic capacity workouts per week. You see what I did there? You make a little puzzle. You start with 1 threshold workout, put in a second one. Take out the second one, put in a VO2 max one. Then over time, you take that one, you take out the other one out, put in a second VO2 max workout. So slowly but surely, you transition over the course of the year, or however long your training plan is, you transition from higher volume and lower intensity to lower volume and higher intensity. And you plan out the training, you do it backwards from the most important race, and that's how you plan out the training with the intensity and the interval workouts. As far as what the interval workouts look like, they're not as important as remembering the purpose. So like for example, if the purpose is a VO2 max workout, you want the reps to be around 3 to 4 minutes at your maximum heart rate. Does it matter if you run 800 meters or 1,000 meters? Nah, not so much. You just got to you can even do it off the track and do it on the road somewhere and just do it all by time. Does it matter if you run 3 minutes or 3 minutes and 32 seconds? No. What matters is that you're running at the right intensity to meet the purpose of the workout. Same thing with anaerobic capacity workouts. Does it matter if you do 300s or 400s or 600 meter reps? No. What matters is that you run fast enough to cause a drop in the pH of the muscle, to cause acidosis. Your legs don't know, 300 meters, 400 meters, 500 meters, legs don't know that. All they know is, whoa, I'm in an acidic environment, I need to make some adaptations here. And so if you run repeatedly where you cause acidosis, that's all that's necessary. And then you repeat that week after week after week for a while until you have sufficiently made all the adaptations, and now you're fasting. And so how you transition throughout the year is just a matter of taking in one workout, then adapting to that, adding a second one, adapting to that, and then slowly putting out a workout, taking in another kind of a workout, and that's how you adapt over the course of the year. So that is a pretty quick, brief explanation of interval workouts. During VO2 max interval, let's go back to threshold first. Threshold workouts, if you do it as an interval workout, take a passive standing walking rest in the intervals. Very short. It's only going to be, maybe 45 seconds to 60 seconds. Very short. Take a passive rest. For the VO2 max intervals, jog, active rest, active recovery, to keep VO2 elevated throughout the workout and to increase venous return back to the heart. For the anaerobic capacity workouts, again, active recovery. You want to have blood flow going to the muscle even during recovery, buffer the acidosis, bring bicarbonate ions there, buffer the acidosis, even though the acidic environment is going to increase throughout the entire workout. You're not going to be able to bring down the pH just in the short recovery interval that you have. So lactate is going to accumulate the whole time, and acidosis will accumulate the whole time. But active recovery for the anaerobic capacity workouts as well. So that's what you do during each recovery period of each different kind of workout. And so it's just really a matter of understanding what the purpose of the workout is. If you're doing workouts, you better be able to answer the question, what's the purpose of this workout? Why'd you do the workout that way? The other issue is, again, going back to understanding the purpose of interval training and to accumulate more total distance or more total time at that pace than what you could have done if you did it continuously. So like if say you're going to do a workout of 20 times 200 meters, that's 4,000 meters worth of work. I've seen workouts where people will do like 20 times 200 at 5K race pace. And that's a silly workout because you could have run continuously for 5K. The whole purpose of an interval workout is that you can accomplish more total work at a given intensity than what you could do continuously. So if you're going to do 20 times 200, don't do it at 5K race pace because then you're only doing 4K at 5K race pace. It's not enough. If you're going to do, say, look at mile reps. If you're going to do mile reps at you can do mile reps at 5K race pace, then do more than 3 times 1 mile, because otherwise you could have done that continuously or run them faster than 5K race pace. So always ask yourself what's the purpose of the workout and match the speed to the purpose and accomplish more total distance in the given workout. That's the whole reason for doing it as an interval workout. So let's see. Let's scroll through any questions. I can't find questions. So if you have any questions, feel free to ask. Otherwise, we'll answer questions during the when I get off this. I'll answer any questions in the comments. If you want to type your comments in, type your questions in, then feel free. So that's pretty good background on interval training and how to do it and why to do it and when to do it. And if you want any training programs, you go to my website, runfit.com, and you can get training programs off the website. And if you want to learn a lot more about interval training, the history of interval training, how it all comes together in a training program, then I urge you to take advantage of my running certification course, Revolution Running, which is an acronym for Running Economy, VO2 Max, and Lactate Threshold. It's the best certification on the market, guaranteed. You even get 100% of your money back if you don't think so. And no other certification does that because they can't make that promise. And so I'm happy to offer 100% money back guarantee. So it's my show. I can plug whatever I want to plug. So I'm going to plug my training programs, get the training programs off the website. Don't waste money getting a training program from someone who doesn't know what they're talking about. They're all over social media. And get a training program from my website and get the certification. If you're a coach, get the certification course. You'll learn so much. So let's see, what else can I talk about interval training? It's actually fascinating how this all came about and the scientists and coaches who were involved in the early days of interval training and this whole concept of being able to accumulate more total distance at a given pace if you break that distance up into periods of work and rest. That goes back to Per Olaf Astrand, who did his research on a cycle ergometer in the lab. And that's what he discovered, that if you take the set amount of work and break it up into smaller sections, smaller periods, that you can accomplish more total work at a given intensity or even at a higher intensity. So that goes back to Astrand's research in the 1960s. Very fascinating. And then you go back to the cardiovascular research in the 1930s over in Germany. It was done in East Germany at Freiburg University. So this whole stuff is fascinating about how interval training came about. Oh, one other thing I can mention is that in the fitness industry, a lot is being talked about high intensity interval training, this HIIT training, HIIT, H-I-I-T. If you look at the research and where that term comes from, it comes from a lot of the research is done on cycles, on cycle ergometry, working on a stationary bike in the lab. And so doing body weight exercises like burpees and lunges and jumping jacks and that kind of stuff, that's not high-intensity interval training. That is such a different stimulus than cycling really, really fast or running really, really, really fast and then recovering and then running again or cycling again. It's a very different stimulus. You're not going to get the same effect from the burpees and the lunges and the jumping jacks and the squat jumps and all that stuff. That's a great body weight workout, but it's not high-intensity interval training the way it has been studied in the lab and the way it is meant to cause physiological changes. You're not going to get the same physiological changes from doing jumping jacks and burpees and that kind of stuff. Even though it's still a good workout, it doesn't affect the muscle, it doesn't affect the cardiovascular system the same way. I mean, it would be almost impossible to reach your VO2 max during that kind of calisthenic type of body weight circuit and to sustain your VO2 max. I mean, try to do a VO2 max workout with body weight exercises. That would be very difficult to do and to sustain your max heart rate. I mean, if you put on a heart rate monitor and do those exercises, you'll see for yourself that it would be very, very difficult to reach your max heart rate and to sustain it. But when you're running, of course you can. I mean, it's much easier to reach your max heart rate and to sustain it for a couple of minutes when you're running really fast, because the demand for ATP is so high that you got to send an enormous amount of blood to the working muscles, and so the heart has to work at its maximum capability to do that job. And so the HIIT that is talked a lot about in the fitness industry, they use the term wrong, and because they don't interpret the research correctly, and they just do a body weight circuit and they call that HIIT training, and that's not really what it is. It's a body weight circuit, and they call it what it is. It's more of a resistance exercise. It's more of a body weight circuit. And sure, if you do it for long enough, you can get your heart rate up, but it's never going to get close to its maximum and be able to sustain that at its maximum. So it's just a different kind of workout. But the fitness industry tends to do a lot of those things. They take like a little kernel of truth from the research, and then they extrapolate, they generalize it into what they want it to be. The fitness industry does that all the time. They do that with Tabata. Funny. You can't do a body weight circuit and call it Tabata. I mean, you look at what they did in their study, which was published back in 1996. You look at what they did, and it's like very different. Again, they were on a bike. You can't do Tabata running. I mean, you tear apart your Achilles tendon if you try a workout like that and do it repeatedly. They did the workout 5 times a week for 6 weeks. It's a lot of intervals. They did a very short sprints on the bike at 170% of their VO2 max. So they measured Tabata training is a good example to study interval training. And so what their study entailed was they did a series of studies actually. So one of their protocols they used was 20 seconds at 170% VO2 max, power output at VO2 max. So they measured everyone's VO2 max and looked at what the power output on the bike was at VO2 max. And then they set the resistance on the bike based on the person's body weight and had them cycle at 170%, so higher than VO2 max power output. And they did that for 20 seconds, recover for 10 seconds, and do it for 20 seconds, repeat that 7 to 8 times, and then do that 5 times a week for 6 weeks. So they did 30 interval workouts in a 6-week period of time at 170% of VO2 max. How are you going to reach 170% of your VO2 max doing body weight circuit training? You're not going to reach that. And so what they found was that if you do these short sprints, taking a very short amount of recovery, that you not only improve anaerobic capacity, but you also improve the VO2 max, which is considered an aerobic parameter, aerobic fitness factor. And so that's what they found, that you also improve the VO2 max because you basically introduce an endurance component when you take a very short recovery. If you were to do the Tabata workout and take longer recovery intervals to replenish the creatine phosphate back in the muscle, then you would be isolating the phosphagen system and only improving speed, and you wouldn't improve aerobic metabolism as well. Imagine if you did 20-second sprint, take 3 to 5 minute rest. 20-second sprint, take 3 to 5 minute rest. That's how you improve pure speed. But if you're only going to take a 10-second rest, now you're bringing in the other energy systems. So now you're not just improving anaerobic metabolism, you're also improving aspects of aerobic metabolism because the recovery is so short. So there's an endurance component to the workout now. It's not just isolating pure speed. And so if you would notice, if you were to do that, they control the power output at 170% VO2 max. But say you were to sprint as fast as you can for 20 seconds, then only take 10 seconds recovery. What you'll notice is that over the course of the workout, the power output will decrease because you can't sustain that power output. If you did it running, then you would notice you would cover less distance on each subsequent rep because you're not going to be able to run as fast if only taking a 10-second recovery because you're going to fatigue rather rapidly. And after the first rep, creatine phosphate is depleted. 10 seconds is not enough to replenish it in the muscle. And so the second rep, the third rep, the fourth rep, you're going to have to rely on a different energy system. You're going to have to rely on anaerobic glycolysis. And you're eventually going to have you repeat the reps enough times, you're eventually going to have to rely on the aerobic system as well to kick in. And you'll be using all 3 energy systems. And so you end up decreasing the power output or decreasing how much distance you can cover on each sprint if you were to just take the 10-second recovery. So again, this is why it's important to understand what the purpose of the workout is, because then that enables you to design the workout such that you know the duration of the rep, you know the duration of the recovery interval, you know how intense it has to be to meet the purpose of the workout, you know what you need to do during the recovery interval, whether you make it passive versus active. So all of this becomes important once you know what's the purpose of the workout, what is it that I'm trying to train. So I don't want to just keep rambling on and on. Again, like I said, I have no teleprompter here, so I'm just speaking off the top of my head. But I don't want to talk all day. It's already 1:45 Pacific time, so we'll leave it at that for today. And hopefully you learned a lot, and you can apply it to your training. Again, ask me any questions. You're welcome to get a training program off the website and take a look at my certification program, revolutionrunning.com, with a 2 after the O, so it's REVO2, UTION, running.com. And I want to finish, every week I finish with a thought. And so I want to close today with my thought for the day is to celebrate the small successes. People look at what I've accomplished, and I've been very lucky to have accomplished a lot. I'm extremely disciplined, extremely devoted to my craft. And I've been lucky to accomplish a lot. But what people don't know is that for every one accomplishment, I have many rejections, many failures, as every entrepreneur has, as every successful person has. And so when you do succeed at something, when you do get a yes from someone, or you do accomplish something, celebrate those small successes and then use each of those successes as a platform for more successes. Success breeds motivation to do more work. And the more work you do, the more opportunities you will see that will come to you. So don't get down on the failure. It's very easy to get down on the failures. I do too. It's very easy when people say no, and you're like, why the hell did you say no? It's very easy to let that happen. But if you try hard enough, you're going to have some success. Nobody just fails and fails and fails all the time and never has a success. That doesn't happen that way. Everybody will have some success at some point if you try hard enough and for long enough. So celebrate each success and then use that, publicize that success, and use that success as a platform for more successes, for more achievements, for the pursuit of more goals, rather than get down on yourself every time you fail. So that's my final thought today. Celebrate the successes and use each success as a platform for future successes. Thank you very much for another episode of Run Talk. I'm your host, Dr. Jason Karp. Join us next week.